Hi, just last week I did a little lesson on a kind of boogie woogie pattern you could play over a 12-bar blues in the key of C, and a lot of you seem to like it, so I thought I'd come up with a similar kind of thing you can do that I think has more of a kind of rhythm and blues feel. There's a link below where you can get the tablature for this, and also I'll put the tablature on the screen, but the great news about this one is that there are just 3 bars of music. One that we play over and over again for the C chord, another one for the F chord, and another one for the G7 chord. So once you've learned those 3 patterns, you just repeat them as many times as you need. And in fact, if you've got a 12-bar blues that has the chords in a slightly different pattern, and I'll show you some of those in a moment, you can just modify this one by moving to the right pattern for the right chord. First of all, let's just remind ourselves of a 12-bar blues. It goes like this. We have 4 bars of C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 2 bars of F, and 2 bars of C. Then a G7 for a bar, an F for a bar, and a C either for 2 bars, or we might do 1 bar of C and a G7 on the end. Different blues work in different ways, and there are other patterns that towards the end of the video I'll mention that you can just modify this to fit. Okay, so here's our little pattern for the C chord. We're going to start with our open C string. On that first note we have a stick underneath showing us the rhythm, but there's a dot after it, and that dot makes that note last half as long again. So instead of going 1 and then straight to the next note 2, we go 1, 2, and. So the next note's going to come on the and. So we have the open C string for 1, 2, and on the and after the 2, we play the 3rd fret of our C string, and then we immediately slide that up to the 4th fret. So we have 1, 2, and 3. I use my second finger there for that slide, and that's because I can then put my index finger down on the 3rd fret of the E string, play that note, then my ring finger down on the 5th fret of the E string. So I have this 1, 2, and 3, and 4. One more time. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Now that's 1 bar of music. We've counted to 4. And in the 12-bar blues that we had at the beginning there, we had 4 bars of C. So we just do that 4 times. 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 4 bars. Brilliant. We're going to come back to the C chord later on, so we'll need that again. So that's just our C chord riff. The next chord is an F, and the good news is this next one and the one for the G7 all have the same rhythm. So once you've got the hang of the rhythm for that first pattern, it's the same for the F and the same for the G7. For the F, we're going to start on the 1st fret of our E string. And then the same idea, we're going to play a note and then move up 1 fret, just like we did down here. 1st fret on the E string, then I'm going to move my hand up. Now I could stretch up with my ring finger, but then I'm going to end up playing with my 2nd finger and my little finger. It's better to shift my hand position a little bit. So I'm going to play with my index finger on the 1st fret of the C string. My 2nd finger is going to reach up to the 4th fret. Now I don't have to stretch. I can take off my 1st finger and put my 2nd finger down. So don't worry about having to do a big stretch, particularly if you're on a bigger uke. I play the 1st fret, the 4th fret, then I'm going to take that same finger and slide it up to the 5th fret. Then I can put my index finger down on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then my ring finger can come across and play the 5th fret of the 1st string. So really slowly, 1st fret, 4th to 5th, then onto the A string, 3rd, 5th. Now I only need 2 of those because on the second line of a 12-bar blues, we then go back to C. So now we can do the second line of our 12-bar blues like this. F, another F, C. So all we need now is G7. The pattern we're going to use on the G7 chord is exactly the same as the F one, but 2 frets higher. So instead of starting on the 1st fret of the E string, we start on the 3rd fret, and everything else is 2 frets higher. So 3rd fret on the E string, then I do my 6 to 7 on the E string, then the 5th fret on the A string, and the 7th fret on the A string. That pattern used the same fingering that you used for the F, and this will feel exactly the same under your fingers, and it will be a lot easier to get them both. If, again, don't worry about trying to think, well, I'm up here, I better use my little finger and my ring finger. Just move your hand up 2 frets and do that familiar pattern. It'll be a lot easier to get it into your muscle memory. Now on the last line of our 12-bar blues, I have 1 bar of G7, and we don't have to worry about the 7 bit because we're just playing a riff that works over all of these chords, but that would be the chord that would be being strummed if you were playing with somebody else. We'll have 1 of those for the G7, 1 for the F, and then the C, and then back to the G7. Now we'd only ever play that G7 riff on the end if we're going to go round again. If we want to stop, we just stay on the C. So let me play the whole thing twice through. The first time I'll put that G on the end, the G7 chord. The second time I'll just stay on the C to finish. Here we go. C, G7, F, C, G7, and again. F, C, G7, F, C. I'm not going to go to that G there because I want to finish on the home chord. Otherwise it doesn't really feel right to finish on a G7. So really, all you need are these 3 bars of music, a pattern for each one of those chords. The great thing about that is there are lots of variations of 12-bar blues. You might have one that goes like this. C for a bar, F for a bar, C for a bar, C for a bar. On that first line, you might have the second bar going to an F and then back to the C, instead of just C for the whole line. Well, if you've got one like that, you can just go C, F, C. Another common variation is on that last line. We went G7 for a bar, F for a bar, and C for a bar, and then maybe that G7 on the end. But you might have one that instead of going G7, F, C, just stays on the G7 for 2 bars. G7, G7, C. So if that's the case, do 2 of those and then go straight back to the C. In fact, you could play this pattern on 8-bar blues or 16-bar blues. As long as it just has those 3 chords, all you have to do is play the right riff for the right chord. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and if you haven't had a go at the Boogie Woogie riff that I did in the previous video, there's a link at the top of the screen now where you can click on that and go over there and try that one out as well. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.